Okay, so the first thing you want to do is acknowledge that you quit or that you're inconsistent or whatever stage you're at in that thing. The key here is to not fight it, by the way. Do not try to make excuses for why you quit or why you're inconsistent or whatever. Life happens, there's a lot of things that go on. Just acknowledge it, and it's gonna make the rest of this process a lot easier. The next thing to do is to figure out why you stopped. So there's multiple reasons we stop things, right? I'm gonna list out some things that I've done in the past and maybe you can relate to what I've done. I know one of the first things that comes to mind is that I set goals based off of emotion. You know, I've really done that more times than I can count. And because I've set those things off of emotion, I didn't really calculate the process or what was gonna go into that thing. And when reality would hit, you know, that difference was kind of daunting. And so it would make me stop, or it would make me not be as consistent as I wanted to be. So be aware if you are the type to set goals based off of emotion. Another one is not realizing the true difficulty of something. You know, especially in today's age where a lot of things on YouTube or the internet in general are marketed as like easy actually and all this other nonsense, right? And so you may get into something and think, okay, it's not gonna be that hard or it's gonna be fast and simple. But in reality, it's not. And particularly things on my channel like languages and music, they're both really hard from start to advance. They're just difficult. And so if you go into something like that, or even whatever you do, if you go into it and you're thinking that it's not gonna be hard or that all the days are just gonna coast by, you may not set yourself up to be as consistent as you wanna be. Another one could be taking a long break, but it ended up being longer than you expected. That's pretty self-explanatory. And another is maybe you didn't actually like it as much as you thought. You know, sometimes we often just want the end result, but we don't really want to do the process. And I've done this before too. And if that is the case for you, it's not really like something you need to sit there and whine or cry about. Just acknowledge like, okay, maybe I don't actually want to do this thing. I actually find that to be pretty common in MMA. You know, you guys know I like combat sports, right? So some people will come in or do the sport and they realize like, okay, I want to be a good fighter, but I don't want to learn how to fight. I don't know if that makes sense, but there's a lot of people like that. And for them, I think it's totally okay to just stop, because sometimes you maybe just want to be a good fighter, but you don't want to show up and practice a lot. I know it may sound like you're quitting or like you're a bad person, but it's really, you know, sometimes that's just life. Same thing with music, same thing with like languages. You want to be fluent in a language, but you don't really want to do the process it takes to get there. So if these things happen, I would say, you know, acknowledge that as a reason that you just didn't do that thing and keep it moving. Get on to something that you actually want to do. Another would be things that you can't control, mostly. You know, life in general kind of throws a lot of surprises at us, and then you have work, school, and just a lot of other things that go on, right? Some things you may have to put down for a while and it's hard to pick it back up, or you may stop. It is what it is. You know, I was in the military years ago, and I was what was called forward deployed, which is basically you're deployed to a certain area, but from that area, you go on either scheduled or random deployments. So at any point, we could just be chilling at home and you get a call saying, okay, tomorrow we have to leave, or we have to leave in 2 days, or things like that. And so you could never really schedule things out too far, because at any moment you would just go somewhere. And just like that, sometimes in life you may just have things that come up and you can't control it, and it takes a lot of your time and energy away. So that may be a reason that you're inconsistent or that you just had to quit on something. The point is, you want to acknowledge these whys so that you can avoid them as much as possible in the future. That's why I'm bringing these up. These are kind of like my own reasons, but you can think of whatever you can. And I would say even little silly things, you know, don't be embarrassed about little random reasons that you quit. You're the only one that really needs to know. So no matter how like silly or crazy you think it is, acknowledge that as a reason that you quit. Again, we're doing this so that we can avoid it in the future. And lastly, I would say distractions. Distractions was one of the reasons that I was pretty inconsistent with things. These are things like social media, video games, and then other distractions in life. You want to acknowledge that, because honestly, it's one that we can make a lot of excuses for. And I know personally, I can kind of check the box doing the bare minimum and then get back to something that's just going to waste my time. And if I continuously do that, I'm not going to make results in that thing that I'm trying to do. And people I come across too, they will do the same thing as that, or the same thing as me, and their excuses are really good, just like mine are. They're really good. And so if you take the time and sit there and acknowledge that this is a problem, what it's going to do is going to help you stop, talking yourself out of just doing the work that you need to do to be consistent or not quit on that thing. I can probably go on, but these are like more personal experiences and things that I've seen. So whatever you have, just acknowledge it. And I would also say maybe write it down somewhere where you can go look at it, and you can, just gauge future goals based off of that. Let's talk about starting things again. I would say one of the first things you should do is find a compelling reason to start that thing. Now this, I can't really guide you through it because everyone has their own reasons for doing things, but what I can say is that you want to write it down in a very simple way, or put it in like a Notion document in a simple way, somewhere where you can view it frequently. Again, you don't have to write an essay or like all this very structured or documented things. Just simply, I want to do this because of that. Even if the goal is silly or the reason is not that cool to someone else, you're the only one that's looking at it. So write that down, have it somewhere where you can look at it, because it's really going to help you on days where you're not really feeling it. Something I do apart from writing things down is I often look at videos that inspired me to get into that thing. I often look at the people that I like a lot and I listen to their music, or I'll go watch their content on YouTube, and I will use that as like long-term motivation to just keep practicing and getting better and better. Another thing to do is to look at people around your own skill level. If you're a complete beginner and you're looking at all these advanced people who are 10 years into that process or 5 years into that process, it might actually be a little bit discouraging for you to stay consistent. So you want to go look at beginners. Look at people who just started, or people like their day 1 to year 2 journey. And this is going to help you relate a bit more, because if you're not finding relatable examples, it's going to be a bit harder to get yourself into that consistent flow. Another thing I would say is join an online community, just in general, from beginner or whatever level you want. I have a Discord for this channel. The link is either going to be in the description or my about section. You can join there. There's people of all levels and pretty much everything. But you want to find some sort of community, either in person or online. You may find relatable people there with similar struggles or similar problems as you, and how they got through it. And it'll help you get past certain barriers or certain things that you may have trouble with. Again, I do want to say this again, do not make this a complicated process. Write something down that's compelling but simple. Okay, the next thing is, do not double your workload to catch up. This is a very important step, because I often find that in myself and other people, when you're inconsistent or you quit at something and you're getting back into it, you kind of have the tendency, we all do, we have the tendency to try to make up for that lost time. This is not a good thing to do, because you're only just going to burn yourself out pretty quick and then be back to quitting and being inconsistent. I've told this story before, but when I started learning piano, when I bought my piano, it sat in the box for years and I never opened it because I was too busy looking for some perfect plan or some perfect curriculum, and I never just sat down and practiced. And so when I started, this was a really big problem for me to not do, which is like trying to make up for all that lost time and trying to double my workload every day. I had to just sit back and relax. And now I've pretty much caught up to where I would have been. But you have to tell yourself not to do that, because in the long run, you're going to have better results if you just take the normal route of consistent, continuous practice. So overall, do not double your workload to catch up. I'm going to put that on the screen again because it's really important. Please do not do this. Okay, let's talk about learning fast versus rushing. And now I've made a short video about this a while back, but I really want to emphasize the difference here. Learning fast is not the same as rushing yourself to learn something. When you're trying to learn fast, it should really be an internal motivation. It should be excitement and, just that drive to push through those days that you really don't want to do it and days that you also want to do it, but like an internal motivation. Rushing, which is what most people call learning fast. Rushing is comparing yourself to other people, trying to fit some timeline or trying to race against some clock that doesn't really exist. And when you do that, it actually causes you to become inconsistent and quit. And it also brings up a lot of other issues. I also bring this up because rushing will create a negative association with that hobby or interest or whatever you're doing, that goal in life. If you're learning a language and you want to learn it in a year, and so you're trying to cram in all this extra study time, but if it's not an internal motivation, you're just going to do yourself a disservice and end up quitting anyways. However, if you wanted to learn a lot in a year and it's, self-motivated and you're just excited to get after it, even on days where you're tired, you're going to get a lot more progress that way rather than trying to do it just to fit some time or compete with other people. I don't really know how to articulate this correctly. I don't know if I am, but please try to make that distinction. It's really going to make or break your results. Learning fast is not the same thing as rushing. I'm all for learning fast. I talk about it in several videos, but again, it's an internal motivation. And if at any point you are rushing the process, you need to stop, take a break, and just, take a step back and look at what you're doing and make sure you get yourself over to the learning fast side for correct reasons, not rushing. I would also add, be aware of content that makes you feel like you're behind. I know YouTubers in particular really make a profit off of making you feel like you're behind or like you need to catch up to other people. If you start watching videos like this, I know you may like the person, even if it's me, this applies to me. If I give you this feeling, you need to dissociate with that person or that kind of content because your mental health behind these things, as far as learning in general, or really learning fast or rushing, your mental health behind that really is going to be the foundation. And if you're ruining that with, comparisons that don't really matter and all these other issues, you're not going to get the results you want. We will as creators because, we have the time and resources to do it, but you won't. And if you're letting a random creator ruin your results, it's not going to work out for you. So again, even if this applies to me, you need to dissociate with that. If someone is making you feel behind or like you're not doing enough, just cut that out immediately. Learning fast is not the same as rushing. I'm going to keep saying that in future videos as well because it's really important. Also, if you're liking this, hit the subscribe button and like the video. That's the best way to help me out. Anyways, on to the next thing. Pay attention to real life examples. One of the things you should do is be a little bit more cautious on what you're watching. So if you're learning a language and you're watching a creator, this includes me, by the way, please use this on me. If there's a lot of jump cuts in their language that they're using, you need to associate that with, authenticity. Is this person really transparent with their skills? One of the reasons when I speak Japanese on this channel or I make videos in Japanese, one of the reasons I don't like using jump cuts and I leave all the errors in is just for that reason. When I learn things, I like to look at people who are very transparent, whether that's guitar, piano, or anything else. I like to look at transparent videos. If you're learning an instrument and it's like overly edited, I don't know how to say this, overly edited music and not really raw clips, and you can tell it's not authentic playing, that's not someone you should be watching. And really start applying that to everything. You want to look at real examples because this is going to help you actually practice more. And one of the reasons I think people back in my time, I'm 33 almost, but people back when I was learning things in like my early 20s and all, I think we got a lot better results because there wasn't all this fake results content around. A lot of it was very authentic and there wasn't overly edited and overly saturated videos. And so we just did more things. We weren't overthinking it and we just got a lot more results. So start trying to find channels and people like that, where it's not overly edited and covered up and all that. Again, I don't know how to articulate this correctly, but I hope I am. This is really going to dictate your results, whether you realize that or not. And I say that because if you're watching too much like fake content, you're gonna assume that that's real life. And then when you are in real life, which I assume you are, if you're in real life doing that thing and it's not really lining up with what you're seeing, even after a while of practicing or doing that thing, it's not going to create a good association with whatever you're doing. So please pay attention to that. Look at real life and authentic expressions of whatever you're trying to do. And a quick bonus before we end this is that you want to avoid content that claims that you can get meaningful results with little effort. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but this whole clickbaity life today of easy and fast and all that. You really want to avoid that at all costs, because there's nothing meaningful that's easy. And I know that's not popular to say because people won't like it or subscribe or stay along with it, but I have to tell you that if you want something that's meaningful, it's not going to be easy. In fact, it's probably going to be very difficult, and you need to just know that up front so you're not gonna get into it with the wrong frame of mind. It's not really a lot to say about this. Most of this is just things you'll have to refresh yourself on. So if you find yourself quitting or being inconsistent, just come back to this video and click through the chapters and look at what you need to look at. And again, really start paying attention to what you're doing, because that is going to dictate how fast you learn and if you learn at all. I'll put 2 videos on the screen that I think you will like, one about goal setting and 3 different ways I like to reach my goals, and then one about simplifying your routine, because most people are doing way too much and not actually getting results, and they need to simplify it. So watch one of those if you want, or just go take action on this video. That's really what I want you to do. But if you want to watch something else, there will be these videos. Go ahead and subscribe, or I will hit you with this AEGIS Reflector setup. If you don't know what an AEGIS Reflector setup is, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and subscribe. Again, we have a Discord. Join that. Just hang out. And there's ways to support me as well in the description, but keep your money if you want. I don't really care about taking your money away from you. You do whatever you want. Love you guys, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.